Aloha, and welcome back to Leaving the Church to Find God, your safe space for exploring faith beyond traditional walls. I'm your host, Melissa, and whether you grew up in the evangelical church like I did, or any other system while seeking answers, you're in the right place. This podcast isn't about judgment or attacking institutions. It's about honest conversations, diverse spiritual paths, and celebrating the unique journeys that we all take in search of meaning. We've all experienced indoctrination in some form, and here we explore how it shapes our understanding of ourselves and the divine. Each week, we'll dive into thought-provoking topics, share inspiring stories from guests and listeners like you, and offer tools and insights for navigating your own deconstruction journey. Remember, leaving the church doesn't mean leaving your faith. It's about finding your own authentic connection to something greater. So buckle up, embrace the open dialogue, and join me as we explore what it means to move beyond confines and discover the deeper personal connection to the divine that exists within us all. All right. Aloha, Dr. Mel. Welcome to the pod. So nice to have you here.
Thank you.
So we always like to start with your leaving the church story. So where did it all start to crack open for you?
Well, yes, in the early 70s, you weren't here yet. In the early 70s, I started reading stuff by Norman Vincent Peale, and just about personal growth and such. And of course, he's a religious oriented, but a very positive speaker, a very positive writer. But it was in the early 70s, I discovered personal growth. And the first personal growth book I was introduced to was called I'm Okay, You're Okay by, I can't think of his name, the author's name now. But this was like the beginning of an explosion of personal growth and self-help materials. And so I always call that one my first one. But as I got involved in that, what happened was personal growth was not only just about dealing with stuff. It was about opening doors to other possibilities. Up until that point, I was fixing televisions and radios for a living, and I was fixing copying machines, and I was driving around, and I didn't see a higher education in my life at that time. But when this started to happen, that's when I clicked onto it. Took a introductory psych course, and that introduced me to a lot of subject matter, including religion, and it lit a fire. So that was 1973, and 10 years later, in 1983, I graduated with a PhD in psychology and became a fully functioning therapist. I stopped being involved in my religion. As I said in my letter to you, I grew up in Catholicism, and I stopped my involvement with it. But it wasn't until I started working with people who were traumatized by religion. They're traumatized by other things, and the usual array of stuff. But they were traumatized by religion in a way I hadn't even imagined. And as I got into the subtleties of what these people were going through, I realized that I was carrying that very same trauma myself. And because it's so subtle at those early levels, it's so subtle that you're actually programmed to be ashamed of even questioning it. You know, it's so sophisticated. Their whole indoctrination system is just so sophisticated. All these buttons are installed, and when you're a child, what do you know? You know, your parents are in this religion, their parents are in this religion. You know, what do you know? That this is normal. And, along the way, well, everybody else's religion is wrong and yours is right. And, that's just the way it is. So as I worked with people going through this, I realized for myself that I had to deal with those issues myself. And so over the years of training, and then in my early years of practice, I was still seeing a therapist myself to deal with these kinds of issues. And so the religion thing, it just grew stronger and stronger in terms of my personal understanding. And if you've lost someone in your life, you know how that feels.
Mm-hmm.
You know that pain, right? You know that pain.
I do.
Well, when you get in touch with a part of you that's kind of buried underneath all this indoctrination stuff, it's like meeting a different person, and you're uncovering, a lost child, but it's you. It's a part of you that, because of that conditioning process, got buried under layers and layers of attitudes and guilt and shame, and being defined as a sinner, that kind of stuff, which, until you start questioning that, it's just your normal. But when you start questioning it and you're hearing from other people, I worked with people from Jehovah's Witnesses. I worked with Aboriginal people who went to residential schools. And in Canada, there's a huge explosion of events in the last 2 years, to the point where the Pope came to make an apology to her, because they were finding bodies in the distant areas of these residential school lots here in Canada. Mm-hmm. And these were kids that were allegedly runaways, when in fact they died at the hands of these religious people. And so when I think about the bigger picture of what Catholicism and Christianity was doing going around the world, in the case of this event, it probably happened in Hawaii. They came there to knock the savage, or the primitive spiritual beliefs out of people and install their forms of Christianity.
They did to the point, actually, that they made it illegal for anyone to olelo, which is the Hawaiian language. They couldn't speak the language. They couldn't olelo Hawaii. Olelo means language, but they weren't allowed to speak the language. They weren't allowed to dance hula. They weren't allowed to sing their songs. They weren't allowed to have any connection whatsoever. Like, even the kids would get in trouble. And this is in the 1950s. I personally know people who grew up in school. They would get like lickings from their teacher if they were caught like dancing hula or speaking olelo or anything. Completely eradicate the culture. That's what they've done everywhere that they've colonized.
That's it, Melissa. That's it. That's the nail on the head. And my spirituality now is very much Aboriginal. It's mm-hmm. like the way they view nature, the way they interact with nature, the way they respect nature, and they respect the balance of life. And you take what you need and you give thanks for what you receive. You don't annihilate, whole populations of different animals and such. And most certainly you don't annihilate populations of people because you think your stuff is better than their stuff. This sounds like the same story that echoed right across this country where I live. And anyway, so digging into that, here's something I discovered just very recently. For a long time now, I'll go back 12, 15 years, I started writing essays on dealing with religion. And I call these essays, the series, I call them Religion Doesn't Have a Prayer. So, and those essays were published at a European website called Trans4Mind. It's the word trans, the number 4, mind.com, if you ever want to look it up. They're publishing, and for a long time though, really, really good personal growth, spiritual growth kinds of materials, stuff that you would appreciate. Oh. And that's where that began for me. But then as I learned from the people I worked with and saw these things in myself, those trauma factors, I realized that there's a big healing needed here, in terms like not any different than the kind of healing you go through when you're saying goodbye to a loved one. There's pain, there's crying, there's emotional release, and when you touch these sore spots, right, things can be quite explosive. And one of the things that's buried the deepest of all is rage. People experience and feel rage at this institution that just pummeled them with their, for me now it's nonsense, but conditioning and conditioning and conditioning. And from a psychological point of view, the conditioning is you're a sinner, you're bad, you're defective, and your only way to heaven is to go to confession and do what we ask you to do. Put money in the kitty, light candles, and pray. We sell redemption. It's kind of like
it's always about outsourcing your personal power.
Touche. That's it. Yeah. That's it. And so recovery for me and for the people I work with is about getting in touch with that deeper self, crying your way through your grief and sorrow for what that child of you, for what that younger part of you lost. And then as you just get deeper inside, the glow of heartfelt love, unconditional love, just starts to grow. And it's a hard message at first, but you get the message that it's okay to start loving yourself. Oh my God. If you're in front of a Catholic or a nun or something, it's ooga booga. It's just horrendous.
Yeah, I recently had a family member post on Facebook. It's been a lot of backlash since I started this podcast. I'm from an apostolic Pentecostal family. And someone posted that self-love was satanic.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So just to affirm what you're saying. Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh no, Melissa. So you're already facing the consequences of this position that you've taken and what you stand for now. Those consequences are there for me too, because the extended family is still very Catholic, and but I have at least one sister of four who's very much appreciative of what her big brother is doing, and she reads everything, and she had her own dislike and rage against the church for lots of different reasons before I started putting out. Well, I put all these essays together and developed this book. But as she started reading it, and she said, it's like you go to the doctor and the doctor says, okay, you got this, and this. They give you a diagnosis, and now you have an understanding of why you feel certain things and what medicine you might need. She realized, she said, yes, I didn't know it, but I have trauma over this religion that we grew up in. And just the language and the descriptions helped her make sense of that. And it's like, yeah, that's my condition. And now I need to heal this.
Yeah, 100%. So what I love about the book, I've read through it. I didn't have time to read the whole thing, but I did. I'm good at scanning and summarizing, and I'm really actually excited to go back and read it because it's so in alignment with my own journey and with the journey of other people that I've had on this podcast. It seems like the experience that I have found is the journey always leads us back to ourselves, and we're always empowered by unconditional love. No matter what the path was, that's where we always land. And I find that so interesting. That was my experience, but I had no idea that every guest I would bring on from all different walks of life, from all different experiences, it was the same thing. Finding their way back to themselves and then experiencing the power of unconditional love. And I want to speak to what you said earlier about that child coming in, because I had that experience. And, I remember telling my therapist one day when I was in the early stages of because I deconstructed, 20 years ago, but I moved away and didn't really acknowledge any of the trauma or anything. I was just spiritual bypassing my way around it for like 2 decades. And when I finally started doing some deep trauma therapy, I became aware of how deeply it was affecting me and religious trauma. And as these things started to lift, that experience of letting that child out, things started to look different. Like I would go to the same places that I had been, but see them in a different light, see them in a different way. And she had said to me, that's just you meeting new parts of yourself, you meeting parts of yourself that you haven't seen in a long time. So, yeah, I think that's really beautiful. And that's been my experience as the more I uncover and deconstruct the indoctrination, the more I realize I'm like, oh, this is who I've always been. Like I didn't become something, like this is who I've always been. It just had a bunch of junk piled on top of it,
Yeah, you're reopening, or you're not reopening, you're opening the package to who that core Melissa person is, and that unhindered energy and whatever she's attracted to, and what's important to her, without the cloud of all this imposed stuff. You get to know her, and if for me that becomes spiritual. And spiritual in the sense, like spirituality is not religion, and religion is not spirituality. Spirituality is innate. It's for me it is, and for most people that I meet, undergoing this is a major transformation.
Yeah.
When I was doing my degrees, the thing that I studied was major transformations in people of renown. For example, Hermann Hesse, Thomas Merton, was Catholic oriented but a spiritualist, and his great book is called Seven Story Mountain. O.H. Maurer, an American psychologist who wrote extensively about forgiveness, and another person that most people don't know about, his name is Clifford Beers, but he wrote a sensational book at the turn of the last century called A Mind That Found Itself. These are people that went through major transformations. And so that became a backdrop to what I was doing. But the common denominators are exactly what you're describing. What you're describing is what I experienced myself, is what I witnessed with people I worked with, in the therapy room, and who I hope to reach now by pulling all this material together to just get people to get back in touch with that little child within, and to understand and allow that self-love is not narcissism. It's self-appreciation, and it's about allowing that flower to bloom. That flower that is you to bloom.
I love that analogy. And that's what it has felt like for me, is a blooming for sure. I want to build a foundation here because we got a lot to get into. Can you, the premise of this is in religious trauma. Can you, for those who aren't as familiar, who are listening, can you give us like a definition, and maybe what do you see as the key characteristics of religious trauma?
Well, I'll summarize it under the heading of demolished self-esteem. Okay.
Wow.
So you're being from the get-go, you're being in most Christian religions and other fundamentalist religions, you're being defined as a sinner. So the natural bond that you should have or would have with your parents, especially your mother, is being blocked by this definition. And if she's an indoctrinated person as well, she's the person we connect with first. So at least at the physical level, we get that bonding. But when the definitions start pouring in, and the typical definitions of Christian religion are, number one, you're a sinner. All right. And some Christian religions, mine, there's original sin. So you're not only a sinner as a definition, but you arrived here that way in some faulty package, which is absolutely nonsensical. So all the basics that they pound into you, which are all based in sin, and the two main weapons are guilt and shame.
Yeah.
Shaming you into nothingness, shaming you. Then you start to believe what they're telling you, and you start shaming yourself and guilting yourself and disliking yourself. And that's personal destruction.
Yeah.
You're doing it unwittingly because you're following their program. You're not doing this because this seems to be a good thing to do. You're doing it because it's the way of your culture and it's the way of that religion.
Yeah.
This is where, so anything that destroys your self-worth, that's trauma. Anything that abuses you and calls you down as a person in terms of your personal value, that's trauma. And the effects of trauma show up as anxiety, depression, low self-worth, and that list that you can expand on. You can expand on all of that. And what's the worst feeling on the planet but feeling shame? Like it means that I'm defective. It means that I shouldn't even exist. It's so damaging. It's for me, and I've used this term. I don't know if it's in the book or not. I call what they've done, religion has done to people, you and me included, a crime against humanity.
Yes.
That's what I call it.
Absolutely.
That's what I call it. And so that's trauma. And like any other kind of trauma, whether it was an accident or that there was you had a close call, someone threatened your life, that kind of thing, those traumas, people coming back from wars, post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Well, there's the new terminology as it affects religion is called religious trauma syndrome.
Wow.
Look it up. And it's going to start showing up in the definition books for psychological disorders. Just like post-traumatic stress disorder emerged in the 60s and 70s for people coming back from the Vietnam War. It emerged in the US primarily, but there were other countries involved in that. And it used to be called a shell shock. That's what it was called in World War I and in World War II. But so this trauma now has an identification, and if you Google religious trauma syndrome, you'll see it pop up everywhere. And if you Google, and you probably have done on this, but if you Google religion in decline, they're on a steep dive down.
Yeah. I don't Google a lot. I'm very intuitive. I can feel that. I feel the energy. I see it happening. It's a movement. it's a movement.
Trust that energy. And that's what you're doing. And now you've opened the door for people to share with you, and you're helping people trust that energy. You've got firsthand experience.
Yes.
And you've got people like myself who've lived it, but also have a professional experiences with helping other people. And you're right on the money. You're right on the right path. And so things have to be defined first. It's like it's the diagnosis, right? It's the diagnosis. You have religious trauma. Oh my God, what is that? All right. And then so in the book it's explained. What chapter is it?
Yeah, it's an easy read. It's not like super heavy in jargon or anything. It's very layman's for those of you who are listening. It's really, from what I have looked over and been able to see from what I read, like I said, I was able to scan it pretty easily because it's very clearly laid out. It's really a roadmap. It's beautiful.
Good. It's chapter 11, abuse victim profile. But everything prior to that is leading up to it, including my own story, and then the things that I take on, like the nonsense of sin, the nonsense of guilt and shame, the nonsense of you needing them for your redemption. Well, after they've condemned you and told you were worthless, after all of that, basically they set up a marketplace for themselves. And now they're the distributors of this artificial thing called redemption. So you confess or whatever your religion requires you to do. But first, they defined you as defective.
Right. So I'm curious, though, what have you noticed in the differences in your patients between women and men and their experience of trauma in the church?
Well, men typically, batten down the hatches and block, whereas women are more amenable to dealing with issues because they have a different level of permission to feel already. So it's okay for them to feel pain and feel sorrow and cry. And men are getting there now. And you even see it on television when men are having an emotional moment. You see the tears run down the face, and they're not running away, hiding, being ashamed of those emotions. So, but men are still behind the curve as far as being in touch with their feelings, but it's coming.
Yeah.
It's coming.
Oh, they definitely, and the younger generations are definitely more in touch or in balance with their masculine and feminine energies. But as far as in the church, in the experience of in the church, because from my experience, like men, we've all experienced trauma, but men had a lot more power and were put on a pedestal in a way, and women had a much greater loss of autonomy.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering in your patients how you saw that show up differently between men and women.
Well, it was easier to get women to the point where feeling the pain of the trauma, whatever it was, and in particular the trauma of how their religion treated them and diminished them, and once you're there and it's okay in their own mind to feel these things, it's easier for women to get there because there's a general permission for women, just an open door to feel at different levels. And by the way, that's why women live longer than men,
right?
Because men repress this energy, and you talk about energy. This energy turns into disease. It attacks the body on the inside because repressed emotions, that's a pressure, and they translate into different into different definitely psychological issues, but chronic physical issues. They translate into those things. So, but as men get the message that it's okay to feel, and it's difficult for them because they're programmed against it. The British stiff upper lip, that just means swallow your feelings, right? When you're dealing with very difficult stuff, that's okay. But post-traumatic stress disorder is when you're not in that danger anymore, or that circumstance where you have to be stiff. You can now deal with what you had to suppress. You can now deal with those feelings. And that's why those people, the military people, as an example, recovering from PTSD, have less problems emotionally and psychologically than the previous generations who had shell shock, and their only outlet was to go to the local legion for ex-military people and drink. Drown those feelings. That's what drugs are for. It's drowning, numbing the feelings. That's all it is. That's all it is. So it's better for men now. And I chatted with a former pastor yesterday, and he runs a podcast, and he's very open to his feeling, and he's just a different version of you. His doors are open to people abused and hurt and traumatized by their religion, and getting to the heart of the matter, the feeling level. So for the people who turn to him for and he's lived it. You may have heard of Dr. Darrell Ray. His book is called The God Virus. There's a lot of similarities there, the way he describes his upbringing in evangelical Christianity, but he's in a different place in terms of outcome. He declares himself to be an atheist.
Mm.
Well, that's his choice and that's his decision. For me, it's not like I went to see there's this thing called spirituality. I'm going to go find it. No. When you get in touch with yourself and you open up to that deeper self, the spirituality is already there. At least that's my experience, and it just emerges.
Well, it's our essence, right? It's just getting to our true essence.
Exactly. It's our core. It's the energy that animates this body. These bodies are just things we wear while we're here on this planet, and we're here for different experiences. And you and I are having this experience of working through the trauma of religion and offering what we learned to other people.
Yeah.
To help them through it.
So on this energetic, trauma level, how do you see, especially with the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church is so global.
Yes.
I mean, Christianity becomes more and more global as the missionaries go and do their thing, but Catholicism has been so global for so long. So how do you feel like this whole, like you were talking about before, how they've trained you to default your spirituality and to not listen to yourself and to hate yourself? How do you feel like this has affected humanity on the planet?
It's been an extremely damaging, and and thank to the internet, but we're in an age of an information explosion, and so they're getting more desperate. The Vatican and the Catholic authorities are getting more desperate, and I'll give you this example. Who is it more than anyone else that wants open borders in the southern U.S.? It's the Catholic Church, because uneducated and superstitious types of people, doesn't mean they're dumb. It just means they don't have information.
Right.
They're exactly the target market for them.
Right.
And as people gain personal understanding, read books in the self-help section and psychology sections of bookstores, normal things, see guests on TV shows who talk about going through religious trauma or other trauma, but what are healing themselves from these effects, more and more and more people are waking up and moving away from these superstition-based and created religions. And I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime, but I would be happy to see the whole thing collapse.
Yeah.
But people have to find their way there, and this is you podcasters, this is a very powerful movement in and of itself. You sidestep these so-called authority layers that give you permission to do things, and you talk about what you live and what you experience and what you know, and you open that door for people to share with you. It's kind of like online group therapy.
Yeah.
It's good for all of us.
Yeah.
And so these discussions, the reverse is true. The conspiracy theories and that nonsense have their own audience, but this is a healing modality. And their foundation, and I touch on some of the subjects. I'll use one example. You've heard of Mary Magdalene.
Yeah.
Okay, Mary Magdalene, and you've heard that she was declared a prostitute.
Yes, and I know that wasn't true. That's just what they called any woman who was independent and empowered.
591 AD, Pope Gregory the Great, more than 500 years after Jesus Christ, or Jesus, and a cohort named Mary Magdalene, recast her as a prostitute.
Wow.
Why are there no pictures of women in those Last Supper gathering displays? Mary Magdalene means Mary the Great One, right? So in 591 AD, a pope, a flat out liar, declares her to be a prostitute, because you can't have the patriarchy, right? You can't have feminism or the goddess energy coming forward again. So we declare that. So guess what happened in 1969?
What's that?
Vatican redacted it.
Really?
Did you see it on the news? Did you hear about it?
Of course not. No.
No. It was all done underground, but they redacted it. They redacted it. So if you Google the name, you're going to see all kinds of more accurate historical references to this person. Well, this is the kind of garbage they were pulling all along. Right. And
there were women who were disciples, and
yes.
I've done some research on, I have done some research on patriarchy and finding its origin. And there's a lot of support to say that it's that organized religion was developed specifically to subjugate women and put men in power.
Okay. That makes perfect sense to me. And what the Roman Catholic Church did is they capitalized. This is very strange. It was the Roman army that crucified Christ, and then the Roman army morphed into this thing called the Roman Catholic Church. You know how that happened.
I never put that together before.
Yeah, they 300 years after Jesus's presence and his prophecies, they noticed these groups of people gathering to study his teachings. So they grabbed onto that and developed for themselves a religion. So, and this is me speculating, but if you can control people through mind games and indoctrination, it's a lot easier than killing them, because it's a lot less expensive and a lot easier. So you can manipulate them, you can control them, and you can direct them. And
you can use them for your own gain.
Exactly, you can use them for your own gain. And it wasn't in those early days. The church still had an army, and they still did a lot of slaughtering. And there was a pope in the 15th or 16th century called Pope Innocent II, who okayed the slaughter of whole groups of people in, I think it was Portugal. And one of his generals sent a message back saying, "Well, how are we going to differentiate between the heathens and those that are like us, those that are of Christian intent?" And Pope Innocent said, "Kill them all, and God will sort it out on the other side."
Wow.
This is in the history books. Yeah. This is the kind of garbage that religion and the offshoots, the offshoots of, call them subgroups of Christianity. Henry VIII has a meltdown because he hasn't been able to produce a male heir. So he wants another wife and another wife and another wife. So he abdicates, pushes Catholicism out, but not completely. And now you got Anglican, the Anglican version of Catholicism, which is Catholic light, basically. But it's
yeah,
it allows you to divorce, it allows you to remarry, and ta-da. But so the Catholic Church, realizing that that's a modality that people would want, decided to pull something of their own and called it, what would they call it? It's about reversing the legitimacy of a marriage so that a person is not divorced, but they're reversing the legitimacy of a marriage so that the person who's unhappy or married to someone dysfunctional or whatever, so they can remarry. So even if there's 3 or 4 children, so basically they're nullifying the marriage, right? And then this person, and I know this for a fact because my uncle, one of my father's brothers, went through that. They're all Catholic to begin with, and he was married to a very dysfunctional woman, and so they had several children and had to give most of them up because he couldn't take care of them. So they went their separate ways, and he got involved with another woman who was in an unhappy marriage. Anyways, so between the two of them, they had their former first marriages nullified, and they were allowed to marry in the Catholic Church.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
So that's the games they play in order to keep market share.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that makes sense. I have a guest coming up soon that was the CEO of Catholic Charities, and he has some experience of that, where he was actually doing a lot of really valid work to help people, and the Catholic Church was pushing up against, because it was really meant to, be a PR for the Catholic Church, not to actually help people. But
okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they want to present themselves as pious and just saintly. I don't know. So I saw this on the internet months ago, but a Catholic bishop somewhere in Europe lives in a $40 million home. So much for piety and
right. Well,
all of these claims, and I look at the Vatican, like, what is the Vatican but another castle, isn't it? It's a castle, and what are they wearing? Aren't they wearing robes like royalty used to wear? And why are priests not allowed to marry? Is it for piety? No, it's because if they marry and have children and then the priest dies, then the Catholic Church has to look after the family. It's business. That's all it is. It's business. The whole thing is. It's just, it's a massive con job.
Yeah.
It's a massive con job.
Wow.
That's what I came to see. That's what my essays were about. And then, like, it was last year, and it's like something inside my deeper self, my higher self said, put it into a book, put it together.
Yeah.
And I did that. And then at Amazon, the Audible books series was catching fire. And so for 3 months, I did different versions of the book in audible format. It's now available that way as well. Just
links for
just
all
have it
to be listening. There'll be links to all of everything as usual in the show notes and in the description. So
yeah, I mean, of course, I want to see books move. I want to hear from people that it helps. I want to hear from people that it's making a difference in their lives. That just lights me up like a 500-watt bulb.
Right.
That makes my day. This is my mission. I don't want to get too grandiose about it, but everything I've been through and where I'm at now, 7 months shy of 80, this is my mission at this point, is to take all of that, put it together, put it out in front for people, to help people see what's going on inside themselves as survivors of religious indoctrination. And you go from survivor to a real freedom expression of yourself, as you've discovered, as you uncover those layers and get more and more in touch with that beautiful little being inside who's just waiting for you to show up and say, come on, let's get together, let's play, let's do what we're here to do, let's love ourselves, and let's spread love around the planet.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because in the inner child part, there was a lot of work where, I have pictures around my house of myself at different ages of my life that I speak to and give love to. And it was so much about, reparenting my inner child and nourishing my inner child and all of this. But there was still this, like, there's the adult me and the inner child me. But, last year I had an experience where I realized that the two had become one. It was no longer me and my inner child. It's just me. It's all me. It's who I've always been. And it was such a profound understanding. I honestly consider it the greatest achievement of my life. And in that moment went from, feeling a lot of lack in purpose and stuff like that, to understanding that, like, I've done it. Like, everything from here on out is icing on the cake. This is what I came here for, was to get these two back together so that I can unify myself, have that unity. And it reminds me so much of, like, the message of, unity in the whole body, mind, spirit, and everything that goes deep into spirituality. And when you experience it in this firsthand, it's very profound. It's a really beautiful experience to just be you, fully, authentically yourself. It's the most divine experience of my life.
Yes, it's a rebirth.
Yeah, it is a rebirth.
It's a rebirth of the...
I'm writing a book. It's titled the same as the podcast. I had the similar, a very strong channeled message come through me of, like, write this. I didn't even know what I was writing until it all started coming together. But hold on one second. I lost my train of thought. Oh, in the book, it's broken into 3 sections. It's the birth, the death, and the resurrection of myself. Yeah. And I find so many parallels into that. It's like in the teachings of Jesus, which I don't really refer to the Bible because there's just more garbage than there is good. But I remember the good became a part of me as I learned it growing up. The words of Jesus and the example of Jesus became a part of me. Luckily, I've been able to leave the other garbage behind. But that was the message. It's the birth, the death, and the resurrection. We're born, then we have that old person, that old man has to die off so that the real authentic self can be reborn.
Yeah. Most important thing from Jesus's pronouncements is simply this: the kingdom is within.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bingo. That's it. It's psychological, it's spiritual, it's everything we need to know. Because what religion trains us to do is not trust ourselves. What recovering from these traumas and indoctrination is to do is to trust ourselves. And by trusting ourselves, we're trusting that deep spiritual energy, that divinity that is us. And it's not some God sitting somewhere in a chair, passing judgment on us. That energy is inside of us, and that's what you're recovering when you reconnect with that little child inside. Because I used to do this exercise. I would working with a person, I would say, bring me a picture of yourself as a baby. All right, and they bring a picture of themselves as a baby, and now I would say to them, tell that baby it's defective.
Right.
Tell that baby it's defective. No. And the reverse of that was, tell that baby that you love them. You couldn't do that too.
Wow.
But down the road, they could.
Yeah.
This is your disconnect from yourself. Mm-hmm. And I said, and anyway, so it was an exercise, but it was just to have an awareness moment. A beautiful child just being popped out and just there and being held and caressed, it's just pure innocence, right?
I remember asking my mom that as a kid. I mean, I remember where I was at in the church parking lot and everything. We were going down into the Sunday school building. I was probably 6, maybe 7. And I remember asking my mom, like, okay, so if you have to, because, I'm Pentecostal, so you had to, like, speak in tongues and get the Holy Ghost and all of that in order to go to heaven. And I'm like, well, what if a baby dies right after it's born? And they didn't get to speak in tongues. They didn't have a chance to do that. And the answer was always like, well, the Bible says that everyone will have a chance to know the truth. And that was the only answer I could get. The Bible says that everyone will have a chance to know the truth. And I never could really reconcile that.
Well, that was your mother's indoctrination. That was it. The Bible says this, and that's it. So there's no questioning it. And you're part of the energy and the generations, the new generations that are challenging all of these things. And it's necessary so that we, as a humanity, have a better relationship with our planet and all life forms on our planet. So that it's not about greed anymore. It's not about running herds of buffalo over cliffs so that you can cut the hides and go sell it somewhere. It's about an interactive relationship with a planet that supplies us everything that we need. It's all there. It's all there, and all life forms are of this divine energy. Including the ants we might step on them once in a while, or the flies that annoy us. All right.
Yeah, I'm definitely with this, like, because the mosquitoes, like, I don't kill them, but it's me or them. I feel like there's an energy exchange there. It's me or them. They're going.
But yet we see it more easily than in pets.
Yeah, definitely. I remember that too, like asking about, like, well, what's going to happen to our dog Scruffy when he dies? And, well, animals don't have souls. Was the answer that I got, which is crazy to me because, I lost a beloved pet last year, and he's communicated with me so many times. And I mean, of course, I knew that was crazy before this past year, but that was the response. Animals don't have souls. Wow, the church is really empowered humans in the wrong way. Like, took away our personal power, but also made us believe that we were supreme to everything else, which is really bizarre to me.
And back to patriarchy versus feminism. I got to see up here we have what's called the National Film Board, and the title of the it was a documentary, and it goes back to the 80s or early 90s, but it was about the goddess energy. Goddess energy was a bunch of women were being interviewed, including some very famous women. And so there's a Canadian production, but most of the women being interviewed were American. And, at different universities, real thinkers, the so-called pagan eras, and the era of goddess energy was thousands and thousands of years old before this shift to the patriarchy and the dominance of the so-called patriarchy and men over women. But that goddess energy, those periods, people lived in harmony with their environment and with nature and with everything that the earth supplies, that we all need, including everything that's walking, breathing, and needing nourishment. So it was powerful to see this and to hear these powerful women talking. And I can't think of her name at the moment, but one of the Margaret Atwood, Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of people that they show that goddess energy, and it's coming back. And you may be one who's showing your own version of this goddess energy coming back, to throw things back, to pull things back into balance, and our lives on this, while we're here on this planet, and the planet itself has a living energy. It's part of, why not? It's
living and breathing and moving and expanding all the time. Of course it is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And my analogy is, or my orientation is, we're guests here. Let's be nice guests. Let's treat our host. Let's treat our host with kindness and respect, right? Yeah. And let's market this thing called love. Let's market it, and let's just send it around the world and around the world and around the world, because at that energetic level, we're all the same.
Yeah. And
what are religions? They're divisive. They're rigid categories. It's us versus them. In the Middle East, they like to have holy wars. Well, so we're fighting for God. Well, wait a minute. So your God against our God and against their God, and it's crazy. It's just
when it's like, if they're gods, why do they need us to do it? Like, they got way more power. Like, why are they depending on us to fight these battles for them? That didn't make a lot of sense.
you got it. You got it.
Wow. So I know you're saying that if you had it your way, it would all crumble. I agree. I agree. What, and there is a decline in religion. There are more people waking up. I feel like our access to information has a lot to do with that. I also feel like it's our natural evolution. I feel like everything's a pendulum swing. Like you're talking about, we were in the divine feminine. We swung way over here to patriarchy. And now we're kind of swinging back a little bit. Eventually things even out. And I love this swing back. We're about to have our first woman president in the United States. Like, that is huge. Like, that's huge. I have no doubt that that's happening. This is the energy.
You couldn't have a more blatant contrast than Kamala Harris versus that other person. And
seriously. Much of my family is from family's from Georgia, so they're very conservative. So I just, like, while we're having this, I feel like this is a very important conversation considering our current climate. But I did make a post yesterday on Facebook, and I will to stay off of Facebook for the next 3 months to maintain my sanity. But the question was, in this contrast, it's like, okay, so take your youngest daughter, granddaughter, niece, the youngest little girl that you love the most. And if you had to, what's your gut instinct? If you had to leave her with someone, who would you leave her with? Like, the contrast is so stark. Like, there's no question about that. And I'm like, if you're going to tell me that you're going to leave her with the other guy, you are lying. You were lying to yourself. You were lying to her, but you're going to leave our whole future and our whole country in his hands, but you wouldn't leave your own child with him. Like, wake up. It's just, sorry. I had to get on that soapbox real quick. Not let time pass me by. But you're talking about, go ahead.
Oh, just a quick aside, but his niece, Mary Trump, is a psychologist, and she wrote a book about that family. And he comes from, it's not an excuse, it's just a reality, but he comes from a pretty horrible background. And, the wealth stuff aside, he learned what he learned from the patriarch of that family.
Right.
And people who grow up in dysfunctional families, and especially where there's a dominant abusive parent, they adopt one of two strategies. They either become a bully and an aggressor like that person because they view that as strength, or they become a professional victim.
Yeah, the internalizer or the externalizer, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. And so this man and all these people gathering around him like flies on poop. This is extremely dysfunctional. It's just extreme. Yeah.
But if you look at who the followers are, I feel like this is actually really important in the context of this conversation. Is if you look at who the followers are, like, indoctrination is how it is. Like, I mean, most of these people are like conservative Christians or, evangelicals who have been indoctrinated. So this cult-like mindset and this overturning of power and looking the other way, and that's bred in us. Like, it is ingrained into the brain. So it seems from an outsider's perspective, it's like, this is insane. How can they fall for this? But from the inside perspective, it's completely normal.
You use the right word, cult.
Yeah.
Religions are cults.
Absolutely.
Cults.
Absolutely.
And they're have you ever heard of Unitarianism or?
Yeah, I have. I've actually been to a couple of Unitarian churches.
Well, my wife and I go to one, and there are no rules. There's no guilt. There are no rules that diminish people. There's no guilt and shame. There's no sin. There's none of that stuff. The doors are open to every group and subgroup and minority group and, LGBTQ, whatever, and the common denominator, the thing we align ourselves with is love and service to community. And some of your America's great writers, Walt Whitman, Thoreau, and many others, they were Unitarians, just because it just made sense. It made cognitive sense, but it made emotional sense.
Right.
And we have a natural inclination to gather, to in communities, and with our hearts open, our inclination to help others is just it's part and parcel of the package.
Yeah.
At whatever time of the year up here, Christmas time is a big one for everybody. But yeah, reach out to different groups and community groups that need help. The seniors, street people. There's all. It's for me and the people I hang out with. It's just normal.
Yeah.
It's just normal. There's that innate kindness and affection. It's just
that was the last episode actually of this podcast was about morality, and because so many people, even people who aren't church people, I find it very fascinating, believe that without religion people would not be moral. And so through the episode, of course, I break this down and show that morality is innate, of course, but it's crazy like how deep that indoctrination runs, is that morality and the church are, coincided. So we both know that that's not true. What do you see? But you have a deeper understanding of human nature and how people respond and react and depend. If all of the religion were to fall apart and there were none, what do you feel people would do? Do you feel people would even allow that? Because I feel like for so long, people have been trained to defer, like to not take responsibility for those things because that has been given to someone else. So I also feel like we've gotten kind of lazy in that personal responsibility. And a lot of people would rather just have someone tell them the rules to follow. And they feel like if they follow those rules, then they're a good person and they're going to be okay and everything's good. What do you feel like would happen if it all crumbled?
Well, it's going to be like a slow moving retreat, so to speak, like a glacier retreating.
Right.
But there are alternatives, and there are ways for people to be involved in their communities, whether it's a different kind of church like Unitarianism, but that just happens to be a convenience. There's all kinds of groups that are forming and offering services to help disadvantaged people, and our inclination to be kind, when we're healing all our wounds, and we don't have this big bucket of rage and hurt inside ourselves anymore, and we can be ourselves. It's easy to reach out, and it's easy and find people of like mind and like heart. It's easy to find them, but there's this interim period now, and it's happening. I'll give you an example. So the statistics about church-going populations and different countries, how large or small the population of a country is Sunday churchgoers. The average for some Western countries is about 20% now, 20% of the population.
Wow.
But some countries like Sweden, it's 6%.
Right.
And that's it. So
those countries over and over again get rated the happiest countries in the world.
Touché.
Those Scandinavian countries. They
do, because they care, they have health care. Health care is caring, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about paying the highest priced doctor for whatever. It's about caring. Yes, they're healthy and they're productive, and their economies are strong, and their population. The
There has to be
U.S.
some of that can be accredited to the fact that they're not spending their time trying to prove each other wrong.
Touche.
Right.
Yes. Seeing the good in each other and being there for each other. And then so competitiveness withdraws and starts to shrink. But the lull I'm referring to is there's a lot of people right now who are carrying trauma, but they're not going to church anymore because their anger towards the church is just like, they're just not going to go. What they still have to do is what you're doing and what I've been doing and what people I've worked with are doing, and people reading books and people joining groups and talking about these things. That's the next level of healing so that you can become your whole self. That is still the goal.
Yeah.
That is still the goal. And we were indoctrinated to not trust that part of ourselves and to disown that part of ourselves and to view it as defective or wrong. We were trained to do that. Well, psychologically, that's the most damaging thing you can do to a person. Psychologically, that's psychological trauma. And so becoming a psychologist was just a byproduct of seeing something that it was a path out of this morass of guilt, shame, and sin that at some level I already knew didn't make sense. But as I moved along through it and got to the point where I could start writing about it, it's just blatant nonsense.
Yeah.
And it's cultish, as you pointed out. And we know what cults are. We've seen outtakes from the Moonies at airports, or Jim Jones and his crew that he took down to the Central America and then poisoned them with poison Kool-Aid. That's cultish. But the evangelical religions and all the subsets of Christian religions, they're cults. Catholicism is a cult, and cults hurt people. They hurt people. That's it.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. I've never seen a cult end well. That's or for the benefit of the people who are taking part in it. That's for sure. That's definitely,
and Melissa, and that's why the Catholic Church wants open borders, and you want these people from these uninformed, uneducated countries, because that's their market.
Right.
That's their market. The rest of us are waking up.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sense. They haven't been exposed to what, these current ideas and information and openings that we have in the same way. And it's hard. Plus, it just occurred to me as we're talking, like, it's also easier to manipulate people who are in survival mode.
Yep. Yeah, give them some bread and some water, and then, you're looking at those basic needs, and then they're ripe for your program.
Yeah.
You can start preaching your stuff, and be holier than thou.
Yeah, exactly. So for someone who is, I know I definitely feel like people should just go and read the book, but for our listeners, what steps can you recommend for people who are recovering from religious trauma on how to get the ball rolling, especially since therapy is not really accessible to everyone right now, or other, healing modalities? Like, what would you recommend to someone who doesn't have access on how they can begin to heal this for themselves?
Well, what they can do is what people are already doing, and coming to your podcast and coming to other podcasts and getting informed that way, and hearing from people like me who have worked professionally in these areas, reading books. And in my book, I've been doing, it's called journaling, and I've been doing it for 30 years. And that's how I talk to the deeper parts of me. And that's how they inform me. And that's how we write stuff together. And there's something else that I do, and I'll send you a link later on. But I also create music.
Oh, I love
Music that inspires, that uplifts, and it feels good. It just feels good. It's the reason I fell in love with the blues. The blues is about feeling, and blues music touches people's hearts, and blues music underscores what goes, what gets produced in Motown and these places where feeling music, and these great singers, most of them female, these great singers just deliver these powerful, emotional, heart-wrenching messages.
Most of them female and most of them Black.
Yeah, and that.
To that, there's an extra layer of suffering, an extra layer.
Yes, there is. Yes, there is. Yeah. My hero was B.B. King, and I got to see him live. And, and Aretha Franklin. These are heroes to me. And my new hero, but he's been a hero for a long time, is Bob Marley. Yeah. And for my birthday this year, my wife we went to the theater, and our theaters here have nice big Lazy Boys chairs now, to see the docu movie about Bob Marley, and the music and the story and his message is love. It's all about love, and it just pours out of him, and it shows up in his music. You feel it in the music, and the way he delivers his vocals.
Yeah, he definitely was channeling something. Really.
Yes.
I don't know if you're still in your traveling days or not, but I highly recommend. I had the honor of going in Jamaica to his birthplace and to his home, and it was a very profound experience. It's out in the middle of nowhere. You ride on this. Oh Lord, their drivers are crazy. It was scared the crap out of me. This bus riding on the edges of cliffs and stuff. So you got to have a good stomach. But the whole time, you're listening to Bob Marley songs. But it's really cool because you go into his hometown, which when his mother had passed, she left it to the town, their estate. So it's run by the people he grew up with and friends of the family and stuff. And it's, you can go into his home, you can go into his mausoleum, you can sit on the rock that he would sit on and meditate. And it was a really profound, powerful experience, but I highly recommend it for anybody who's a fan of Bob Marley to go and visit his home. It's really cool.
Well, here's a little side thing for you. Bob Marley and I were born in the same month and year.
Oh, fun.
3 weeks apart. He was older.
So he would be your age right now.
Well, he would be my age if he hadn't died at 36.
In a ridiculous way, by the way.
Yes. But the other thing I wanted to, since you brought that up, is when I was from age 17 to 20, I was in the Canadian Navy. And at age 20, my last trip was to Jamaica. And in Jamaica and on the beaches, it wasn't Bob Marley yet, but there were steel bands everywhere. And the reggae flavor of music, I fell in love with it. And I've been a fan ever since. So I got to taste that part of it. And it was an amazing. So I have nothing but fondness. We were in Montego Bay, and the ship was on a shakedown cruise. There were repairs had been done, and now there were paint jobs being done. And it was also kind of like a vacation for us. So in my trade, I was a radio operator, so I did Morse code. And anyway, so we got there, and we all had our assignments in terms of painting certain parts of the ship. But the biggest part was painting the hull. So the crew chipped in $100 total, and we paid Jamaicans, and they came and painted the hull.
That's awesome. They were like, yeah.
So when we went ashore, they treated us like royalty. They they wanted us to spend money on them, which was fine. And we didn't make a lot of money, but they were super friendly, and for me, that music, it was just an extra layer. And they had this thing, and I forget what it's called, but it was a box that you sit on, and it had a hole in it, and it had metal keys. So you sat on it, and your fingers between. I bought one and brought it home, and learned to play it. Yeah, it was one of their instruments. So
Wow.
that's me with music. Music just grabs me.
Well, music is the voice, I feel like, is really powerful in energy and in releasing trauma and expressing the divine. I feel like there's something really beautiful, which, there's no, because in our church, like, we were taught that music was Satan's tool to manipulate people, and that music was how he got the fallen angels to fall, was through music. And just like dancing, everything that the church demonizes, basically the good stuff.
The good stuff. Yeah. The stuff that awakens the soul, the stuff that enlivens us, the stuff that makes us really feel, really happy, really
energy. If you think about the like enslaved people in the United States, like, they would sing those songs. And, I was listening to a Black woman speak about this recently, and how it creates a shield. When everyone's singing a song, nobody can penetrate that energy, because it just really creates this field of energy that it's a vibration, and something trying to interrupt that or whatever, it can't. And that's how they would find their unity, is in song and singing together. It was really powerful. But you've spoken about, I feel like this is a really good segue into, you've mentioned several times, spirituality versus religion. So I would like for you, if you don't mind, just to clarify this distinction in how you feel, how you define the difference.
Well, religion is simply about control. It's about controlling people, and it's divisive, in boxing people up into groups. Spirituality is universal and freeing, like no other entity, like no other thing, because it's our actual natural embodiment. Our bodies are alive because of our spiritual nature, our spiritual energy. And it's universal in that sense. And for me, my pets can't talk to me, but they show me a lot of emotion. That's spiritual emotion for me. When their body dies, that energy that animates them goes somewhere, and in certain parts of the world, and actually more than half of the planet, has no problem with reincarnation. Energy cannot be destroyed, and energy cannot be created. Energy just revives, and it goes in and comes out into different forms.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And here's a quote that you may not have heard, but you can put this in your back pocket. This comes from Albert Einstein. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. Love.
Right.
That's the unifier. Spirituality allows us to be who we are. In fact, encourages us to be who we are, and will unite us. Spirituality. Religion divides. Religion tramples on us. Religion squashes us.
Yeah, I feel like we can see that. I mean, just looking at our current climate, our current political climate, and it's a little heartbreaking, because I see so many people who I know what they believe, I know their morals, but they're still aligning with this, false narrative. And it's heartbreaking, because I'm like, if you really knew, you would not be making that choice. But because I know what you believe, and I know who you are at the core, and that's not in alignment with it. But not my circus, not my monkeys. I got to take care of this chick right here, right? And just keeps, sharing my truth and creating a space for other people to share theirs, and just have faith that it's all working out exactly as it's meant to, right?
Well, people have to get there in their own time, and so right now, I think there's a leading edge, and spirituality is at the forefront of it, and the fact is that religion is in decline, and it's falling away, and as information accessibility and alternative or views of life and energy and divinity and spirituality, as these evolve and become more readily available and more normal, people will find their way to them. But people who are locked into the cults, they either need an explosion to come out of it, or the next generation will be the ones that say no thanks.
Yeah.
So that's is evolution.
They're like, I'm like, Gen Z's gonna save us, y'all. Gen Z's gonna save us. I still can't understand how being sensitive and caring about people's feelings is a negative connotation, but somehow it has become one. It's to them.
It's being a whole person.
Right.
It's being a whole person.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, it is. It's all, and I talk about that so much, about the holistic nature of us, like that bringing that embodiment, that mindfulness, and that, letting your soul lead. It's that body, mind, and spirit connection that's how we're whole. Because I am here. There is a spirit that is broader than my human body, but this is my human experience. I am Melissa right now. This is my life.
Yeah.
Committed to that. I'm a human, and I'm okay with that. I enjoy the human experience. Not discarding that. I think a lot of spirituality too will go into that. Like your mind's the enemy, and really your body. You're just the meat suit, and blah blah blah. And yes, sure, this is my meat suit, but also this human experience is very valid. But,
it's okay to be spiritual and be in a body.
Yeah, exactly.
And experience the beauty of this planet.
Exactly. The body is how we are experiencing the spiritual, through our eyes, through our taste, through our smell, through our connection with each other, through our senses, is how we are experiencing the spirituality. 100%.
One more thing. I got to go up and take care of my pets. But it's in the book. But Albert Einstein was asked if he believed in God, and he answered it this way. He said, "I believe in the God of Spinoza." Baruch de Spinoza, 17th century philosopher. And the quotation, it's in the book. It's in my book.
You got to go there to find it.
Yeah. And what it is what it is, Spinoza speaks as if he's God, and he says, "You're not going to find me in those church buildings and in those suits. See, go out and experience the planet, the waters, the mountains, the wildlife, and just regale in all of that beauty and all of that energy and all of that love. Don't confine yourself. I didn't build those buildings.
Yeah,
you're on a planet with all these beautiful things, with all this majesty. Enjoy it."
Yeah. We have the opportunity to create. We're literally the manifestation. Like we meet spirit in our physical bodies and create. Like God creates, our God creates through us. Like we are the opportunity for the divine to manifest into physical form. Like how much more powerful and beautiful and magical could that be? It's
Melissa, guess whose books are banned by the Vatican?
Yours?
The Spinoza.
Of De Spinoza, really? That makes sense.
Mine, if and when mine gets banned, I will see that as basically the equivalent of winning the Stanley Cup.
Great honor.
Prize.
Yeah, that makes sense. There are actually mystics who channel. There's there are other books that have been written since in the same way that have just been speaking from that God essence that comes through. Abraham Hicks. I don't know if you're familiar with Abraham
I'm
Hicks.
familiar with him. And we have friends at the church who are, they're both retired school teachers, and one of them is a Reiki master.
Nice.
And Abraham Hicks is one of their go-tos.
Yeah.
And that's that at the door in this place where we gather on Sundays. It's everything is there. Everything is open. There's agnostics there. There's atheists there, and all those other groups. It's just about community.
Yeah.
And about
a place to gather as community. Yeah. That's beautiful. So I always end with for someone who is starting to crack open and starting to understand that everything that they've been taught is maybe not truthful. What would you, for their first step of moving out of this indoctrination, what would your piece of advice be?
Well, do some research on books that are available on the topic, including my own, of course. But there's multiple sources for that. So the self-help section of bookstores, but Amazon is a great place because of what's there. So if you're touched by or you resonate with terms like religious trauma, religious spiritual healing, anything like that, you're going to find material. If there's really dark, hurting sorrow buried inside, see a therapist. See a therapist who's open to spirituality, not religions, but spirituality. Open to a person's experiences, whatever they are, and to help them heal these injuries, these hurts, these harms, these add-on layers that are holding them down. Frequent podcasts like yours. Join groups that are on, like there's more than one, but there is online now. It's a global group, and it's called Recovering from Religion. And it's headquartered out of Kansas City, Kansas, I think. And Dr. Daryl Ray is involved, but he's open to people whose orientations are spiritual. And then my practice, as I said to you earlier, journaling is such a powerful tool. And I have instructions in my book about how to do it for yourself. And you're doing what you were doing, Melissa, when you were connecting with that little girl inside. Mm-hmm. But now, if you're writing it down, you could just say, okay, me, and how you doing? Her, and let her speak. The words will come into your mind. The phrases will come into your mind. That part of you will speak to you. You write it down. The next day you read it and say, oh my God, where did that come from? It came from me. It came from the deeper me. Yeah. Just
Liz Gilbert, there's an author, Liz Gilbert, she has on Substack, she does this letters with God, love letters with God. And that starts her day every day. And she's like, what would you have me know today? And then just write. And I've done it, and it's really beautiful. You really do. I'm just affirming what you're saying to the listeners. Your higher self will come through and speak to you if you allow space. 100%.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And I will happily send you a link to some music.
Thank you. Yes, please do. And I'll link it in the description once I get it for everybody to find. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you. I enjoyed this conversation very much. And
if you want to do this again, like a few months down the road, I'm open to that.
Awesome.
You're good for me.
Thanks.
You're
awesome.
good for me. You're good for me. So this is good. And see where we're at a different point, and so
awesome.
Well, and thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you enjoyed this episode, the best way to show your support is to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, share your thoughts by leaving a 5-star review. It really helps more people to find this space. Want to go deeper? Head over to my website at leavingthechurchtofindgod.com. There, you can make a donation and make sure that we continue to have these conversations. No matter where you are on your spiritual journey, if you or someone you know would like to join the podcast and tell your story, please reach out to me on Instagram at authenticallymelly. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep finding your own unique connection to something greater. Until next time, stay authentic, stay open, and aloha.